My name is Jonathan Roberts, and at the moment I'm studying for a master's degree in musicology, but I also do a little bit of gamelan teaching on top of that. I used to teach gamelan full time, but I've kept a little bit up now. I've gone back to university.
How did you get involved in the gamelan in the first place?
It was a very strange set of circumstances. I was just walking down the high street. It was my first day at university here, and I walked past the music shop, and there was a poster in the window that said, "Come along and learn to play Javanese gamelan." And I'm not even sure I really knew what gamelan was then, but I thought, it was the first day of university, I thought, I'll give it a try, I'll see what this thing is. So I went along and got hooked, really. I suppose I was really lucky because when I turned up there was a beginners group and an advanced group, because the Oxford Gamelan group's been running for a very long time. And I couldn't make the night when the beginners group was. And so they agreed that I could try to join in the advanced group straight away. So I just joined in, and so straight away I was hearing big pieces, more advanced music, and it was just instantly really interesting. I think if I'd started in the beginners group, it might not have grabbed me so straight away, but but that's how I just carried on doing it from then on in.
When was that?
That was in 1995, October 1995 it would have been.
Who was the teacher?
The first 3 weeks, I think, was John Pawson, and then Pete Smith took over. So we had the two teachers.
So then you carried on joining the group?
Yes, yeah. I played for 4 years while I was at university here. And then I went to study in Indonesia after that, and then came back to live in Oxford after I came back from Indonesia. So I'm still in the group now. It's been my home group for a very long time.
15 years.
Yeah, 15 years.
How did you get involved with Southbank Gamelan Players?
That was mainly when I started taking gamelan seriously in my kind of third and fourth year at university here. And to the extent I was applying for the Dharma Siswa scholarship. And because I'd kind of shown that interest, people said, "Oh, come along and play in a concert in London and see how it goes." And so Malcolm Milner and I went along, and we did some singing for a couple of concerts just before we went out to Indonesia, get things started.
Could you tell us your experience when you were in Indonesia?
When I was in Indonesia, it was an amazing experience. There was a group of us going out from England that year, actually. Myself, Malcolm, Maria, and Yasmin, a friend of mine who's originally from Malaysia, but she was studying in Oxford. And also someone who turned into a friend, but we didn't know then, Noura from Holland, but who we met in Jakarta. We turned up and they said, "Your friend from Holland is here." And we said, "We don't know her," but we soon did. I was there for a year to begin with, then I came back to England for a little bit, and something went wrong with my visa, so I ended up getting stuck here for 6 months, and then I went back for another year after that. And because I had nothing else to do in that 6 months, I just played gamelan and went around and watched people teach, because I thought that I wanted to teach gamelan ultimately when I came back. So I kind of did an apprenticeship almost. I went around and they sat in lots of groups and saw how it was done, saw how people dealt with it, and then went back for another year. And yeah, mainly I was focusing on music when I was out there, but in my second year I did a little bit of Javanese dance just to try and understand how it worked for the drumming and tying it in with the music, things like that, and played around a little bit with puppets, but not in any really serious way.
How does it differ playing in Indonesia from playing in the UK?
In Indonesia you have the wonderful thing of being possibly the worst person in the group, always. And in England that's not always the case, but in Indonesia you learn so much more because whatever group you're in, you're playing with people who have been hearing it and playing it their entire life, and it's always an education playing in any group out there. I mean, it is here as well, but it's just that feeling of always having other people around who just totally understand the tradition and know what they're doing in it far more than you do. I mean, it's scary sometimes, being always the one who doesn't quite know what's going on, but it makes you learn an awful lot very quickly if you're in that position.
Is it a different technique the way they teach the students there, or?
I think so. It's hard to kind of unpick it now slightly for me because I'm often now teaching gamelan, and I suppose I'm learning sometimes as well, but I suppose there's formal teaching, in Indonesia. I was a SDSE then, it's now ISI, but and so you had formal lessons, and that isn't that different to the way it's taught over here. I think because most of the people that taught me gamelan had also been on the Dharma Siswa before and had been through that same system. So I think we instinctively pick up some of those elements of how gamelan gets taught in solo, certainly. And so that's a pretty kind of formal setup. You know, it's a music academy essentially, and over here it's slightly different sometimes because a lot of the time you're with groups that are people who are doing this as something they take seriously as a music, but also it's a hobby. So it's not something that it's a slightly different setup. When we went out to Indonesia, we're there to really seriously, totally focus on learning this music. And we were doing it all day, every day, all the time. Whereas over here, quite a lot of the groups, people meet once a week, and it's a social thing as well. It's a fun social thing, and you learn how to play gamelan. But it's not always totally focused on just being an absolutely excellent musician. I mean, quite a lot of people are, but it's just one of these. It's something you do as a hobby almost more than a.
How do you feel when you are playing gamelan with a group? How does it differ from playing Western music?
It's quite hard to describe now because since I've started doing gamelan seriously, I've almost just been doing gamelan. I mean, I still do a little bit of singing in choirs and a little bit of playing the clarinet at home and things. But that was one of the things that grabbed me in the first place about gamelan was this. I'm not sure exactly what makes it different from playing in an orchestra or in a chamber group, but something is slightly different about it socially. It feels more connected and more. It just makes you part of a group while you're playing. And I don't know why it feels different when it's gamelan as opposed to any other type of music, but it just is slightly for some reason. And that really grabbed me when I started doing it. It's that kind of social cohesion. It makes you into a group while you're doing it.
So when you came from Indonesia, you started to teach gamelan. Could you tell us your experience teaching gamelan?
Yeah, I knew that it was something I wanted to give a go I wanted to see if I could get away with doing that as a living. I wasn't sure necessarily whether it would work, but I thought I'd like to give it a try. And I came back and just gradually got little bits of workshops through recommendations from other gamelan teachers and things. And it gradually built up from there. My first experience was absolutely terrifying. I got a few days residency in Tewkesbury with the Bath Spa Gamelan, and no one had told me that the whole second day was going to be adults with severe learning disabilities. And it was my second day of teaching gamelan, and the first time I had ever tried to teach people with learning disabilities. And I found out on the morning when I turned up that this was going to be the case. So I just had to get on with it and see what happened, and I was terrified, but it worked. And it was actually it was a really nice day's teach in the end, but it was a bit of a baptism of fire starting off teaching for me. So the graduate just got little bits, a bit more here, a bit more there.
So you've been teaching quite a lot for schools?
Yeah, I've kind of taught a wide range. Initially it was mainly schools workshops to begin with. Then I started teaching for the Birmingham Conservatoire, so music students doing gamelan as an elective course, a kind of an extra that they could do. And then slightly after that I then started doing a couple of community groups, kind of adult community groups. So I taught one over in Stevenage and one in Cheltenham as well. So I used to teach a whole range from 5-year-olds through to 80-year-olds. The whole range.
How do they take it?
When they first encounter the gamelan, and most people, if it's a one-off workshop for a school, generally the kids come in and are just blown away by the look of the instruments. So it's this initial wow factor when they come into a room and they just can't believe what's in front of them, and then they find out they're actually going to be allowed to play it, because I know they're going to be allowed to play it, and so it's not a surprise for me. But lots and lots of groups, when they turn up, they don't quite believe that they're going to be allowed to play them. They think, so are you going to play them for us? No, you're going to play it. And then they just go, wow. So normally it's a really positive experience. I think only very rarely have I had people come in and go, oh, I don't want to do that. Almost never. It's always generally just the visual impact of a gamelan first of all, and then when they get to actually hit it and they hear the noise it can make, it generally just totally captures them.
How does it work with the disabled? Kids?
It depends actually. I mean, I've done quite a wide range of teaching for people with special needs now, and you just have to work with them on the day and see what happens. Generally it involves shifting lots of instruments around to get wheelchairs close to instruments, and with a Javanese gamelan, not all of the instruments are high enough that you can get at them from a wheelchair, but you can wheel people into the gong rack sometimes or get them on the kanongs, and then I always work from the basic principle of trying to almost do a normal workshop, but just take it really slowly and see where we get to. And get it on. So sometimes you just get a whole bunch of really nice noise, and sometimes, totally surprisingly, you end up with something that you didn't expect at all. Sometimes you find that one of them or any number of people in the group are really, really creative and play something astonishingly beautiful on an instrument that you hadn't expected at all, and then you just work from that. So sometimes I have them playing bits of a traditional piece, sometimes we just do something totally that evolves out of the group and who's there on the day. But yeah, it varies an awful lot depending on who's there.
Have you ever composed music on gamelan?
Once. I tried to compose a piece once. I'm not convinced it's very... We've never really played it much or anything, but it was mainly because I had to teach a course for the students in the Birmingham Conservatoire on... They had the advanced composing students had a series of sessions with musicians where they would do kind of extended techniques, so they'd go and work with a violinist and they'd show them just what you could get away with doing on a violin, or work with an oboist and see what you could do with multi-tones and things. And as part of that kind of package of teaching, they got a few hours with me on the gamelan to explore composing for gamelan. And I always just basically had to take them through what happens with traditional gamelan and show them how some people had notated composition for gamelan in different ways, and play them recordings of people's compositions. I do a mix of some of Malcolm's compositions, for example, then some of Pat Panga's, a whole range of different things, some alpha beta stuff, some new composition from Indonesia. And I just always felt slightly uncomfortable doing that, because obviously I could tell them about how gamelan works, but I couldn't really tell them from my own personal experience about composing for gamelan, so I thought I better actually give it a try doing something. So I sat down and tried to compose this piece, and we've played through it a few times with some of my community groups, but it's never been performed or anything. I'm not really a composer, I'm more of a player than a composer.
There are so many gamelan groups in the UK. How does it fit with the British culture?
It's one of those strange questions, quite why it's taken off in such a big way in this country, but I don't really know, but something just works. I think, speaking from my own experience, I think British people feel quite at home in Indonesia as well, or certainly in Java. Just the way people interact is quite familiar for us. I think that idea of being slightly formal but basically friendly. I mean, it's a stereotype in both countries, but I think it just works. I think British people feel quite comfortable in Indonesia and at home. We don't find it odd particularly. I'm probably just generalising and talking from my own experience here, but there must be something there, because it really does. An awful lot of British people play gamelan.
More than 100.
Something clicked. Yeah.
Would you like to add anything? Suggestion? No.
I can't think of anything straight off the top of my head at the moment, but.
So it's good to play gamelan. Come on, play gamelan.
Yeah, definitely play gamelan. It can take over your life. It's possibly dangerous, isn't it?
How does gamelan affect your life?
Well, I mean, it totally took over mine. I started off as someone who was reading an undergraduate degree in Chinese studies and did Western music. And look at me now, I'm doing an ethnomusicology degree and I teach gamelan for a living, so it can seriously alter your life if you're not careful. And I think it's a good thing, but it can grab you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.